Today is the famous Rathayatra festival. Just recently we celebrated the Snanan Yatra, the bathing ceremony of Lord Jagannath, and the Skanda Purana tells us that that particular day of the bathing is actually the appearance day of Lord Jagannath, who appeared right back in the Satya Yuga. So this feature of the Lord, with his large dilated eyes, and he's got the round face and the hands and legs withdrawn into the body, is known the Mahaprabha Prakasha form of the Lord. It's the form of Jagannath, Baladeva and Subhadra manifesting their love in separation from the inhabitants of Vrindavan. So although just Jagannath worship began millions of years ago in the Satya Yuga, according to the Vedas, this Jagannath worship has been going on eternally. So Jagannath is sometimes called Daru Brahma. Daru Brahma. The deity form of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna, in wood, who cuts away one's sufferings and miserable attachments and awards one eternal life of endless bliss in the spiritual world. He is Daru Brahma, Lord Jagannath. So he's Krishna himself. Actually, it is said that if one thinks that the form of Jagannath is simply an idol made of wood, he immediately brings ill fortune into his life. So the Vedas, they give us information about when Jagannath, Baladeva and Subhadra first manifested themselves on the earth planet, in this particular kalpa. And it was some back in the Satya Yuga, 153,400,000 years ago. There lived a very saintly king named King Indradumna, and he ruled the entire world. He was a Raja Rishi, and he possessed everything that people could dream of: incredible, vast wealth, power, prestige, youth. But in his heart, he wasn't satisfied. Therefore, he longed to see and love the Supreme Lord. At that time, he received some information that the Lord can be seen in a place known as Purushottam Kshetra, which is, Jagannath Puri, on a blue mountain called Nilachala. So he sent one learned Brahma there to find out whether this is true, to find out this place. And after a long journey, that Brahman, he met the local devotees there, and they took him to this sacred place in the jungle. And there was this four-armed, beautiful, extremely beautiful deity of Leela Madhava and his consort Lakshmi. And this deity was so special that even the demigods would come and offer worship and take darshan of this deity in the jungle, Leela Madhava. And this Brahmana, he was so amazed, he thought, he hastily returned back to inform the king, to tell him about this incredible deity. However, what happened is not long after he departed, there was this fierce storm began blowing, and sand and dust was blowing everywhere, and trees were ripped out of the ground, people and animals were running for shelter. So hours later, when the storm subsided, when it died down, devotees went to that sacred place in the jungle to see their beloved Lord, and then suddenly they realized the beautiful deity of Neela Madhava had disappeared. Everyone was just so filled with anxiety out of intense separation. They developed such an incredible attachment for this Nila Madhava deity. Then suddenly they heard this beautiful voice from the heavens declaring that from this day forward, Nila Madhava will not be seen in this world, but soon another deity will appear. And we know that deity is Jagannath, Lord Jagannath. So when the king finally arrived to take his darshan of the Nila Madhava deity, and he found out what had happened, he was completely devastated. He was thinking, what's the use of my life? He wanted to give up his life. At that time, there was a voice from the sky announcing that the king should construct a big, beautiful temple on top of the Nila hill, and the Lord would soon manifest himself in his wooden form. So the king, he built this beautiful, magnificent temple, and he was waiting and waiting and waiting for the Lord to appear, but the Lord didn't come. And he was thinking, the Lord's not going to come. My life is useless. Let me fast till death. And soon after, one night, Lord Jagannath appeared to him in a dream. And he said, my dear king, give up your anxiety, because tomorrow I shall come floating in from the sea in my wooden form. So early next day, the king and all his ministers, they assembled down there by the ocean shore, waiting. And suddenly, this large, it wasn't a deity, but it was a wooden log, just floated onto the shore. So it was picked up, placed on the golden royal chariot and taken to a special place. Then the king, he summoned all the expert sculptors to come and carve the deity. However, despite their attempts, as soon as their chisels touched the wood, they just broke. So then one day after, Vishwakarma, Vishwakarma, he's the famous architect of the demigods. He came. And he came and he was in a disguised form. And he promised the king that the deities will be ready in 21 days. And he'll work behind locked doors. And nobody should come in during that time. And the king gave his word. But on the 14th day, the king could no longer hear the tapping of the artist's chisels. And so although the ministers forbade him, he forced open the door. And he realized that the actual sculptor, he's gone. And he just noticed on the table, there was the forms of Jagannath, Baladev and Subhadra. So the king, he exclaimed, oh no, the deities are unfinished. What have I done in my impatience? Once again, the king wanted to end his life. But that night, Lord Jagannath appeared to him in a dream and spoke to him and told him it appears that the sculptor has not completed carving my form, but this is just part of my pastime to manifest this form of Lord Jagannath. And those devotees who know me and love me purely will always worship me and see me as Shyama Sundara Krishna, playing my flute. Then suddenly Narada Muni appeared, just to explain to the king what this form of Jagannath, Baladev and Subhadra was. The king woke up from his dream, and the king started explaining about this appearance of Jagannath, Baladev and Subhadra in a previous kalpa, in the previous yuga cycle, when Krishna was living in Dwarka. At that time, Krishna, we know he was in Dwarka, but he was always thinking of Srimati Radharani. And he was always suffering due to separation from her. And it is said that during the night, he would cry out, "Oh Radhika, where are you, where are you?" And torrents of tears would just flow from his eyes. So one day the queens of Dwarka, they had a meeting to discuss Krishna's condition. And they soon after met with Rohini. You know, Rohini is Balaram's mother. And they said, "Rohini, you stayed in Vrindavan for 11 years with Krishna and Balaram. Can you tell us about the Brajvasis? About their love that makes it impossible for Krishna to forget them." And Rohini said, "It is so nice. It is so nice. However, when I begin to speak Krishna and Balaram, they'll certainly come and they'll fall into so much ecstasy when they hear these pastimes that I won't be able to speak for long." Then suddenly Subhadra, you know, Subhadra is Krishna's sister, she said, "I will guard the door and warn you when Krishna and Balaram come." So Rohini began her narration and Krishna and Balaram immediately knew Rohini is speaking about Vrindavan. Let's go on here. Meanwhile, Subhadra was there at the door. Hearing this Leela, Subhadra went into complete ecstasy and she became stunned like a piece of wood. Soon Krishna and Balaram arrived and they stood either side of Subhadra. Yet nobody knew they were there. So when Krishna and Balaram heard these pastimes of Vrindavan, suddenly they both became like Subhadra, stunned like a piece of wood. And when Rohini was talking about the love of the gopis and the cowherd boys and Nanda and Yasoda, however, when Rohini began talking about Radharani's love for Krishna, Krishna and Balaram and Subhadra went into extreme, inconceivable ecstasy. And in their ecstasy, their arms and legs entered into their bodies. Their eyes became dilated into big circles, just as we see the forms of Jagannath, Baladev and Subhadra. At that time, the Radha Muni appeared, and he was so overjoyed and happy. And he called out, I have seen the Mahaprakash Bhava, the Mahabhava of Krishna, Balaram and Subhadra, manifesting their love in separation from the inhabitants of Vrindavan. So hearing Narada's voice, Krishna, Balaram and Subhadra, they woke up, they became normal again. And then Narada Muni, he asked, Krishna, I want a special benediction. He asked, let there be a place somewhere in this world where people can see your forms of Krishna, Balaram and Subhadra in your ecstasy of the love of Vrindavan. And anyone who sees these forms, let them get your love. So Krishna said, O Narada Muni, I must fulfill your wish. We'll reside in these forms in Purushottam Kshetra Jagannath Puri and give our love to the world. So, Narada Muni, after telling this story, he told Indradyumna, King Indradyumna, that these are the forms that Krishna wants to manifest here. That's the king. He was fully satisfied, and he offered prayers to Jagannath. And then Vishvakarma, he returned, the architect of the demigods, and he built 3 enormous carts to carry the deities to the new temple. So this was the first Rathayatra, when they took the deities. So this Rathayatra festival, sometimes it's known as the festival of the chariots. And it's, you could say it's one of the most colourful festivals of the year, and it draws large crowds. You know, in Jagannath Puri, millions of people gather to get the Lord's darshan and mercy. And now, due to Srila Prabhupada's influence, we can see hundreds and thousands of people all over the world, in all the major towns and villages, come to receive Lord Jagannath's mercy and participate in this Rathayatra festival. Actually, Srila Prabhupada, he explains that how Krishna, he can be seen in so many deity forms. But the charming beauty of Lord Jagannath is unique. And why is it unique? Because merely one glance from Lord Jagannath free ones from all miseries and grants perfection. You know, in the Padma Purana, Narada Muni tells Sri Prahlad, anyone who sees Lord Jagannath will go to the abode of Lord Vishnu. Elsewhere in the Padma Purana it is said that one who sees Lord Jagannath on his wrath definitely gets liberation and goes to the spiritual world. So some devotees were asking Prabhupada, how is that? How is that? Just by seeing Jagannath, you get liberation? Prabhupada explained that at the time of death, your whole life just flashes before you. And just before you die, at that moment of death, the picture of Jagannath comes up in your mind. You see Jagannath and you get liberation. So, of course, Srila Prabhupada explained that this shouldn't mean that because I have seen Jagannath, my liberation is guaranteed, therefore I can simply do anything I like. Prabhupada said this mentality will not give liberation. You have seen Jagannath, your sinful activities are now neutralized, but don't commit again. Now make spiritual progress, then your liberation is guaranteed. Sometimes they ask Prabhupada, what's the purpose of the Rathayatra festival? And Prabhupada replied that the purpose is to see how Krishna is enjoying. To see how Krishna is enjoying. Prabhupada's teaching us that we should attend these festivals to increase Krishna's enjoyment. And how does Krishna enjoy? Just by reciprocating the loving service of his devotees who are worshipping him, enthusiastically singing and dancing and chanting for his pleasure. And we see that in the Chaitanya Charitamrita. During the Rathayatra, Lord Jagannath explained how he was experiencing so much pleasure just seeing Lord Chaitanya dancing and the devotees dancing and singing. So it was Lord Chaitanya, the golden avatar, who is Krishna himself, who taught us the special significance of this Rathayatra. It's not just simply a preaching event for us to involve non-devotees in Krishna's wonderful pastimes, but it's a medium for the Vaishnavas, for the devotees, to be absorbed in the mood of the Vrajvasis, to taste what it means to be separated from Krishna. So he said this is the perfection of Krishna consciousness, because we know Krishna, when he was just a young boy, he expanded himself into a separate form. And it appeared that he left Vrindavan. He went to Mathura, and then he went to Dwarka, and he became king of the Yadus. So he didn't actually leave. Krishna never leaves Vrindavan because of the love of his devotees there. He can never leave Vrindavan. But he was, by his mystic power, he could not be seen by the devotees there. So it appeared that he was separated from the Radha and the Brijavasis for 100 years. So sometimes they would go there to places like Kurukshetra to meet Krishna. And they would say, they would go there to meet Krishna, and they would plead with him. They would plead with Krishna. Oh Krishna, this place, Kurukshetra, is nothing like the beautiful, wonderful pastoral scene of Vrindavan, where you don't have a sword and weapons, but only a flute and a peacock feather, where you're not surrounded by armies and elephants, but by cowherd boys and cows. Therefore, Krishna, please don't stay here. Don't stay here. Come back to Vrindavan with us. We have come such a long distance to see you, and we've been missing you so much. Please, come back to Vrindavan. In the same way, you can say we have also been away from Krishna for so many lifetimes. Such a long, long time. So we want to bring Krishna back to reside on the golden throne within our hearts. So this is one reason why we're chanting Hare Krishna. Because in order to receive the Lord in our hearts must be pure. So we have to cleanse and purify the heart through chanting Krishna's name. So this is one of we have to understand, that the reason why a lot of people, as I was saying before, that Lord Jagannath is actually Krishna himself. If one simply thinks he's an idol made of wood, it immediately brings ill fortune into one's life. So this misconception actually arises from not knowing the difference between, you could say, idol worship and deity worship. Because according to authentic literatures and bona fide spiritual authorities, this deity worship which we're performing, and this worship of Jagannath, is bona fide worship of the Supreme Lord in his original transcendental form. So the question arises in people's minds, how is it possible that the Lord can take on forms made of matter, such as wood, like Lord Jagannath, clay, metal, marble? Therefore, we have to fully understand the Lord's transcendental nature, how he is a supreme controller, how he is controlling both spiritual and material energy. Therefore, he can convert his different potencies according to his will. It means he can convert material energy into spiritual energy. It means he can appear in this world in forms made of material elements, such as the form of Jagannath, and accept our service. He can do this because he's a supreme controller. I mean, who can restrict him from coming in whatever form he likes? If he wants to come in the form, a wooden form of Lord Jagannath, he can do that. Because he's the supreme independent personality of Godhead, the supreme controller. He can come in these forms and mercifully accept. He can. Another reason is we cannot see the Lord with our material vision. So he mercifully appears in these forms to accept, to be seen by us and accept our worship. So it is said, just like he appears in various incarnations, he can appear in his archer incarnation, the form of the deity. He can do this because he's a supreme controller. You know, Sanatana Goswami, he declared that Lord Jagannath is not just a lifeless log. He only pretends to be. Sometimes he jokes and enjoys special loving pastimes with his dear devotees. Every chance he gets, he indulges in all sorts of sports and tricks with his pujaris and devotees. There's so many stories. There's so many stories, even in ISKCON, in recent times, but also there's so many stories which have been passed down through generations of devotees living in Jagannath Puri, the pastimes of Lord Jagannath. I told that pastime recently about one of my favourite pastimes. It was about Salabhega. You might have heard about Salabhega. He was from a class of people in India, of untouchables. Now, these people are not very high class people. They engage in a lot of sinful activities, and they're not even allowed in the Jagannath Temple. They're not even allowed to come and pull a Rathayatra cart. But this Salabhega, he was a weaver by profession. And even though he was illiterate, he used to compose and sing beautiful songs about Jagannath. You know, his love for Jagannath was just indescribable. You know, during the Rathayatra festival, he'd be in a distant place, and he's just crying tears of love for Jagannath. So he had this desire. He wanted to make an offering to Jagannath. It was his desire. So he brought this big basket of mangoes. You know, he lived about 30 kilometers away from Jagannath. He must have carried this big basket with mangoes. And he was sitting there in the field, a distance from the temple, and he started making his offering. And then the pujaris, some of the pujaris from the Jagannath Temple were walking past, and they saw him, and they thought, it appears that this untouchable is making an offering to Jagannath. How is it possible that Jagannath will accept an offering from this person? But suddenly they noticed the mangoes, they disappeared from the basket. And they went to the temple, they rushed to the temple, and they went into the deity chamber, the deity room, and then they looked up on the altar and they saw bits of mango pulp just strewn all over the altar, and there was mango juice running down Jagannath's face. It's a famous story. Actually, this Salabhega, he became a very famous devotee, actually. And they made a little window in the temple, you know, where he could come and get the darshan. But there's so many amazing stories surrounding Jagannath that just show that he's not just a lifeless log. He's actually the Supreme Lord. And there's so many stories, you know, we hear like Madhavendra Puri, you know, the deity hid the sweet rice, the pot of sweet rice behind the curtain. You mean that story? Or there's another one, the deity who was the witness, you know, who walked behind the Brahmana. Yeah, so actually, you know, one day, you know, we know that the Lord, he goes into seclusion after the bathing ceremony. He has this pastime of catching a cold and a fever, and he goes into seclusion for 15 days. So when he reappears, it's called the Nava Yovana Day, the day of fresh youthfulness. And he comes out dressed in his finest robes and ornaments one day before Rathayatra. So early next morning, Lord Chaitanya, would gather his intimate associates together. And they'd go to the temple to see this special, it's a special ceremony where Jagannath, Baladev and Subhadra leave their altar and they mount their chariots, their raths. And there was the sound of vibrating instruments, gongs and other instruments playing. And it is said, in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, it explains how all the Vaishnavas, they come together like an assembly of clouds. And then Lord Chaitanya, with his own hand, he'd decorate his devotees with garlands and sandalwood. It's very hot at that time in Jagannath Puri. And the sandalwood paste, it keeps you cool. And then Lord Chaitanya, he would form 5 kirtan parties with 24 chanters in each party. And there was 2 other chanting parties which came from nearby villages. So there was 7 Sankirtan parties. And each party had 2 mridangas. So there was like 14 mridangas that were being played at once. It said the sound was just tumultuous. And as the carts moved, they said that Jagannath's mind was just filled with pleasure, seeing the devotees chanting and dancing. And by Jagannath's desire, sometimes the cart would move very fast, sometimes it would move very slow. Actually, one time the cart completely stopped and they couldn't move the cart. Jagannath didn't. And they brought in big wrestlers to try and push the cart. Then they brought elephants. They couldn't move the cart. And then Lord Chaitanya got behind the cart, the main cart, and put his head on the back of the cart. He pushed it. And then the cart started moving. And devotees, actually, they were chanting. It is said the chanting of the devotees was just filling the whole 3 worlds. And, tears were flowing from their eyes like rain. And Lord Chaitanya, he was wandering through the 7 groups, chanting and dancing ecstatically, calling out, Jaya Jagannath, Jaya Jagannath. And then, exhibiting another mystic power, he expanded himself into 7 forms, and he simultaneously appeared in each kirtan party. And of course every group, not realizing that he was also present on the other 6 groups, they were thinking, we're so blessed because Lord Chaitanya is in our group. And in Lord Chaitanya they said, he was jumping so high, he was roaring like a thunder, he was spinning in circles, like a firebrand. You couldn't even see him, he was just spinning around so fast. They said, sometimes he appeared stunned, other times his hair stood on end, sometimes he cried and trembled, even it is said sometimes he changed colour. And sometimes while dancing in ecstasy, he would begin to crash to the ground. But at that time, Lord Nityananda would run in with his outstretched arms and catch Lord Chaitanya. Actually, everyone was just astounded by Lord Chaitanya's dancing. They'd never seen him dance like this. Especially Jagannath, Baladev, Subhadra, they were just smiling radiantly, feeling great joy in watching Lord Chaitanya's dancing. And Lord Chaitanya, he was exhibiting the mood, of Srimati Radharani. Now his eyes and mind were just absorbed in Lord Jagannath's beauty. And he began reciting beautiful prayers with his arms upraised towards Lord Jagannath, expressing his divine love. He was beckoning Lord Jagannath, Krishna, to come back to Vrindavan. Everyone was missing him so much. So, they said that Lord Jagannath is Shyama Sundara. He's Krishna himself. But when we look at Jagannath, we just see the form of Jagannath. We don't see the form of Krishna. But it is said that he revealed his form to Lord Chaitanya because he was in this mood and complexion of Srimati Radharani. Therefore it is said that in Jagannath Puri there's two crying forms of the Lord. It's Lord Jagannath as Krishna crying in separation from Radharani, and Lord Chaitanya in the mood of Radharani is crying for Krishna. Srila Prabhupada, he was a great devotee of Lord Jagannath. From a very early age, as a young boy in Calcutta, he was only 4 or 5 years old. He was asking his father. He wanted he wanted a cart. He wanted to perform his own personal Rathayatra festival. So him and his father, they went to the carpenter shop. But they found out it was too costly to build a cart. And seeing that, little Prabhupada, he was only 4 or 5, he started crying. And there was a sympathetic old lady there. She said, I have a cart. I have a little cart, a 3-foot high cart that you can use. So soon they got the cart. And then Prabhupada and his father, they modified the cart. They fixed the 16 columns and the canopy. Prabhupada was only a little boy. He was only 4 or 5 years old. But he insisted that the cart must look very authentic, like the big carts in Jagannath Puri. And Prabhupada, he personally painted the cart, and he organised all aspects of his own little Rathayatra festival that he would hold each year. And he engaged his playmates and his sister. He also inspired all the neighbourhood mothers to cook special prasadam to be distributed. Just like they do in Jagannath Puri. Prabhupada's little festival ran for 8 days. And all his family members and playmates, they all joined in. And my little Prabhupada, he would personally dress the deities, offer the bhoga, perform the artis. Of course, later in life, at the age of 69, he left India and came to America. And in the following 12 years, he established his International Society for Krishna Consciousness. And he introduced wide-scale Rathayatras and worship of Jagannath all over the world. He spread this culture of Jagannath, you could say, all over the world. And now, wherever you go, incredible Rathayatras are going on, in New York and Canada and Los Angeles and London and Russia and so many places. It's just incredible. And of course, here we are, right here today. We're doing the Rathayatra festival. It's incredible because, in Jagannath Puri, it's a special place actually, Jagannath Puri. There's like 30,000 people are involved in the Jagannath service. You think, how does 30,000 people engage in the service? And you think, there's like administration, security, cleaning, selling the clothes, making the garlands, growing the flowers, growing the vegetables, growing the grains, the milk, making the clay pots for cooking, building them, painting the carts, worshipping the deities, cooking, being a kitchen hand, it's like a whole culture of generations of families who have developed this mood of loving devotion towards Jagannath, Baladev and Subhadra from their very early lives. Just as little children, they're trained actually to carry on the family service to Lord Jagannath. Whatever it is, maybe it's milking cows to make milk to Jagannath. Maybe it's growing the vegetables, maybe it's painting the carts or building the carts. But the family traditions, they take on this service to Jagannath. There's like 30,000 people involved. In the kitchen, there's actually 1,000 men working daily in the kitchen. Just imagine that, 1,000. It's a huge kitchen. It's like as big as a couple of blocks. And they have like 500 executive chefs and 500 assistants. And they're cooking, they've got like 752 burners. And they can feed up to 10,000 people daily. And on festival days, up to 25,000 people they feed. It's amazing. Sai Srila Jagannath Baladev Subhadra ki, Srila Prabhupada ki, Sri Rathayatra ki. Go!